Hey, fellow mathematicians, welcome to the podcast where math is figure-outable. I'm Pam Harris.
And I'm Kim Montague.
And we're here to suggest that mathematics class is more about mathematizing, not about mimicking or rote memorizing, but it's about thinking, reasoning, about creating and using mental mathematical relationships. That mathematics class can be less like it has been for so many of us and more like mathematicians working together. We answer the question, if not algorithms, then what? All right, y'all, for the past 4 weeks, we've been doing a really cool series about multiplication facts. In episode 34, we talked about memorization, automaticity, fluency, and helped clarify kind of the whole issue. In episode 35, we talked about some things that teachers do sometimes that they think will help students learn the facts that actually don't work so well because they're based on learning the facts in isolation, using shame to motivate, or they emphasize speed, which is not really mathematics. In episode 36, we shared one of our favorite ways to help students build facility with facts, problem strings. Woohoo, love problem strings. In last week's episode, 37, we talked about how important your attitude is about learning the facts and some great games to play with kids to help them build their facts and multiplicative reasoning at the same time.
Yeah, we had so many great ideas. We decided to keep
Yep.
episode. We wanted to share some more ideas about what we really recommend as you're working with students and their multiplication facts.
Yeah, so in the last episode, we talked about taking the long view, that it's not this short, it's not a one time, it's not just like do this one thing, but it's like, let's work on these for a long time. Let's keep talking about them. In fact, Kim, you have a seventh grader?
Yep.
Seventh grade? And you still mess around with facts with him, right?
Sure,
Like it's
sure.
a constant conversation. Now, when
Yeah.
I say that, somebody might be like, oh, because he doesn't know him yet? No. I mean, the kid's a brilliant mathematician. You guys should see the way this kid mathematizes. But it's still like a thing. It's a thing to continue to play with. Like we just keep it. We take the long view.
Yeah, to see how many different relationships kids can use, right?
Absolutely.
So at some point, though, we need to dial in a little bit. So we play games and do activities to work on exposing kids to facts.
So
And
sometime
then,
during the year, we need to dial in.
right.
Yep,
So
yep.
at some point, right, when we reach the part of the year where we feel like we're given facts their due, I would have kids think about sorting out ones they knew at their core and ones that they didn't own yet. So we've done a lot of work, we've done a lot of activities. And then when we reach that part of the year, we make individual sets of clue cards based on the relationships that they have made use of. And those clue cards become their own personal flashcards to work with and are based on what each student chooses.
And so, Kim, I think I've heard you say that you actually interviewed each kid and you would sit down with them and you'd sort of use like a typical flashcard deck and just say, hey, let's just check these out. Now, remember, everybody, listeners, she's doing this later in the year where they've done lots of work already building the facts. And then she's like, hey, which of these do you just know, you own, you've got to build deep, and which one do you not know yet? Nice growth mindset language in there. We don't know it yet, but we're going to. And you would just sort of like show them the card and you make a pile. Facts Kim knows, if the Kim's the student, facts Kim knows, facts Kim doesn't know yet. And then take those facts that the student doesn't know yet and make that personalized set of what you call clue cards. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, let's take like a most missed fact. So say the particular kid that we're working with doesn't know 8 times 7 or 7 times 8. So you would make a personal card for that student, just on an index card or whatever kind of card you have handy. On that index card, you would write 7 times 8, 8 times 7, and then a clue to help that student figure that fact, a relationship that would help that student figure that fact. So if it is 8 times 7, that clue might be something like, if I'm trying to get 8 sevens, then maybe I would write a clue of 7 times 7. Because if I have 7 sevens, I can use that to help me find 8 sevens. I just need one more 7. And so on that card where I've got 8 times 7, 7 times 8, then underneath that, I might write 7 times 7. I might write 7 times 7 equals 49. I might write 49. Like whatever it is that kind of pings for that kid to go, oh yeah, that's right. I could use that to help me think about the fact I'm trying to find. Or maybe another clue might be to get 8 sevens. I might write 4 times 7 or just 4 sevens. or 4 times 7 equals 28. I try to write as little as possible
Right.
so that it just is enough to ping the kid to be able to think about, oh, I can double 4 sevens to get 8 sevens. Or for 8 times 7, 7 times 8, a kid might say, well, I know my fives, like 5 times 8, I can do that. So to find 7 eighths, I'm going to find 5 eighths and then add 2 eighths. So we might just write down like 5 times 8, or we might write 5 times 8 plus 2 times 8, or we might just write 40. And then like whatever it is, again, that was sort of cue that kid. Maybe to find 8 sevens, we might write down 10 times 7, because to find 8 sevens, maybe if I know 10 sevens, that's easy, right? That's 70. Then can I get rid of 2 extra sevens? Let's just get rid of 14. Oh, yeah, that's 56. I might use the clue of 7 sevens to find 8 sevens, or 8 eighths to find 7 eighths. Because kids know those square numbers. A lot of kids know 7 times 7 and 8 times 8, and they don't know the one in between. It's so funny. So whatever it is that works well for that particular student, I'm going to write on the bottom of that card. And then
They've been thinking about these relationships already, right? And so it's
right,
not
yeah,
like, oh, let me just come up with something random. They've been working with these relationships in all the games and activities that we've been playing. We've been
and the problem
talking about
strings.
relationships, right?
Absolutely. And so we're just looking for one that works particularly well for that
Right.
student, so that when they are then practicing, because then you're going to have kids practice with these cards,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. And let's talk about that for just a second. When you're having kids practice with those cards, I've heard you talk about circulating during that practice time. Can you
Mhm.
say more about that?
Yeah, so I'm listening for kids who are not making use of the clues that they said are useful to them, right? When
Hmm.
we make these cards, then they are choosing the clue. You just gave us a whole bunch of relationships that could be used, but they come up with one that's useful to them. And then when I hear them not make use of them, they get stuck on one for quite some time. Then we reevaluate the clue that they have on their card.
And you might find it, choose a different clue, and you might
Right.
like just like scratch that one out and put a different
Right.
clue on there that maybe they could use with more facility.
Sure.
Y'all, if you don't learn anything else, teachers, notice how important it was for Kim to be involved. Like she's circulating and she's listening in. It's not just like, okay, go off on your own and I'm going to
Right.
grade papers over here. Like so, you are constantly interested in where students are on the landscape of learning. You are constantly interested in how you can help nudge them towards more sophisticated thinking, and I love that. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, so I'm picturing this deck of cards I'm making for each individual kid, and so I've written 7 times 8, 8 times 7, and when I say that, y'all, I mean both. So I write 7 times
Sure.
8, and then underneath that I write 8 times 7, and then underneath that a little bit with some space in between. Then
Mhm.
we'll write the clue that the student's going to use, and then flip it over and put 56 on the back. Is that
Oh,
right, Kim?
actually, no, 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 no. So the clue goes on the front, but nowhere on the card does it have the answer.
What?
I know it's totally different than a regular flashcard. But here's
Tell.
here's the deal. If the kids are encouraged, we're encouraging kids to play with a partner, right? They're not
Mhm.
playing alone. So I'd pair them up with kids that they could have a conversation with, right? And they're not able to treat it like a regular flashcard. They had to focus on the clue, right? So if they're playing alone and they're just like looking at the front, then they could flip it over and look at the back, then it feels a little bit like I'm just asking you to memorize, which is not the goal.
Because they could just literally go 7 times 8, flip it
Flip
over
it over
56,
56.
7 times 8, 56, and kind
Right.
of do a memory thing. Like, oh,
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to rote memorize this. And that's not what you're trying to encourage.
Right. I'm trying to encourage thinking about a relationship that makes sense to them. And with more time seeing relationships, then it will become automatic.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. So you don't actually put anything
I
that
don't.
the answer doesn't show up there. So how do
No.
you make sure that you don't have kids that are practicing the wrong answer?
Right.
Like maybe they're talking about it. They both agree that 7 times 8 is 55 and they move on. Like, how are you kind
Well,
of.
I'm going to visit with them, right? So at some point, I'm going to sit down with kids pretty often. That's I've mentioned before the 2/3, 1/3 way that I split up my class, and in that 1/3 time, we know our kids so well, right? We have conversations with
Well,
kids.
you do because you have conversations with them and you're circulating and you're dropping in and you're pulling them like you just said. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
so keep
I'm
listening,
gonna
guys.
I'm gonna meet with my students who I know are struggling with some facts, and I'm gonna have a conversation with them, and I'm gonna go through their clue cards with them, and I'm gonna be listening for which ones are the clues are not helpful and which ones they're coming up with an incorrect product.
Yeah, so you're involved. You're
Yeah.
you're you're helping that by being involved. Cool, very nice. All right, so let's give the listeners some practice at this. So Kim, I'm
Okay.
going to give you a most missed fact,
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you to give a few clues that might be good ones that a teacher might offer up to a student. Like, so when a kid sits down and they have this most fact and that he's like, I don't know. She says, I don't know what clue to use. You
Yeah.
might say, well, do you know blank or do you know?
Well,
And
can
so the
I
teachers need to have these clues, these relationships at their fingertips. What were we going to say?
Well, I was gonna say that so you said offer up, and there are definitely times where I'm making a suggestion, but I don't think one of the things that we've mentioned is that a lot of these suggestions come from the students in the class. So if I know I'm working with a most missed fact that's gonna be on many kids' lists,
Yeah,
then we're
absolutely.
gonna make a poster together, and it might be, 8 times 7, like you said, and I'm gonna ask them, what are some clues that could go on your card?
Let's brainstorm whole class.
Yes, and so we're brainstorming the whole class and we're coming up with a whole chart, and then when I'm sitting down with students, I might say, "Hey, was there one on that chart that feels right to you? Is there one that you wanna gravitate towards?" And so I might guide a little bit, but a lot of the times it's coming from, the students, the class as a whole.
But teachers, don't you feel like, Kim, it would be important for teachers and parents to have a few
Oh,
relationships
for sure.
in their head so that they,
Yes.
as the students are talking about it, they can hang with it.
Yep.
They can draw them out when they're making that class poster. They can
Mhm.
like, well, did anybody think about a little over a relationship?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's brainstorm what some of those relationships could be for a most missed fact. Like, I'm going to give you 9 times 7.
Okay, 9 times 7. So a really common clue that I would have seen for 9 times 7 is something really close to it. 10 times 7. A lot of kids just know 10 times 7 because they know 7 tens.
Mm,
And so I would have seen a couple of different variations. So the clue might have just said 10 times 7, or it could have said, if they need a little more nudge, 10 times 7 minus 1 times 7. A lot of kids are really comfortable with fives. So for 9 times 7, it might have said 5 times 7 plus 4 times 7, or
mm-hmm,
maybe just 5 times 7. That might have been enough.
mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier that a lot of kids love the fact that they know squares. And so you might have seen 7 times 7 or 7 times 7 plus 2 times 7. It could have been 9 times 9 minus 2 times 9
Cool.
to get to 7 nines. There's a whole bunch of
Did,
them, right?
Would you ever think about 3 times 7
Uh
and
huh.
triple it?
Uh huh.
Or is that, I mean, that's a great one, except I'm wondering if you
Tripling
don't know.
27 is kind of a funky,
But it would be 21, right? 3 times 7 is 21, and then triple
oh,
21.
yeah, I just in my head
There
wrote 3 times 9.
you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So interesting. If you don't know 9 times 7, I'm not sure 3 times 7 is 21. Tripling that, I don't know. I don't know if a kid would have access to
Yeah,
that. But it's fun to play with. And if a kid says no, that would not help me. Well, then don't put that on their clue card,
yeah.
right?
And
But
you know what? I wanna mention that one time we were in a workshop and we were talking about clue cards, and it's so interesting to me because we made one clue poster together, and then I asked participants to make, at their tables, to make a poster of suggested, um, clues.
mhm.
And then we walked around the room and I asked the participants to put a little asterisk or star next to the clue that they would choose for that one.
Let me be clear. Each group had a different most missed fact. Is
Correct.
that right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So we hung the posters on the wall, and one poster might have said 6 times 8 and one might have said 9 times 6, and so we had all these posters. And then we literally took a marker and everyone walked around the room and I just said, "Hey, choose the clue that you would put if you were making a clue card for that
Mm-hmm.
fact."
Mm-hmm.
And there was overwhelmingly on every poster, almost every clue was chosen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
That is so
you would
cool.
think one clue was picked more than others.
Just more popular. Uh huh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely not true.
Ha! That's really cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so you asked me one. Give me a most missed fact.
Okay, you take, 8 times 6.
Okay, 8 times 6. So I might think that kids might use the double, double, double that we talked
Mhm,
about a couple episodes ago, where they might find 2 times 6 to get 4 times 6 to get 8 times 6.
mhm.
Or they might just know 4 times 6. And that's delightful because 24 then is so easy to double to get
Right.
8 times 6. They also might use squares like you mentioned earlier. So
Yep.
like 6 times 6, and then they have to add two more sixes. I don't know that they use 8 times 8 and get rid of that. If they have 8 8s, but they only need 6 8s, they would get rid of 2 8s. But we could see if they want to do
Yeah.
that. And then again, they might use their fives. Fives are nice. They might think about 5/8 to get 6/8.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, Kim, one of the things that teachers also ask us when we talk about clue cards is, in fact, we just got this the other day. What if, we don't want shame, right? We've talked about how shame is
Right.
not a thing that we desire it doesn't motivate kids well. Teachers have asked, so what if kids have these huge card decks? Like,
Yeah.
we're just really worried. I have some kids will have these like gigantic decks. Some kids will have these really tiny decks. Like, how do we keep the shame out of that?
Yeah, we do get this question a lot, right? And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I'm maybe not as clear about is that this idea of making clue cards comes really late, right? And so there may be kids
Late in
who
the year.
late in the
Yeah.
year, late in
Hmm.
the year, maybe like, second semester after we've played a lot of games and done a lot. And so there may be kids that have none or just a few, right? Or there might be some kids that have a handful, but I never, for all those years, never had kids who had 25 cards or 40 cards. And so it wasn't really ever a thing where there was this whole unbalanced situation. I also loved sending those sets of cards home. So
Yeah.
so that was a kind of thing to let parents know these are the facts that your kids could use some more work on.
Hmm.
And that was once we set up the routine at school, then that was a great way for parents to get involved or for kids to work with a sibling. I know that's not always the case for for some kids. And then I knew those families well and I would play with the kids.
Nice, nice. So kids have been tinkering all first semester,
Yes.
and tinkering and tinkering, and so by the time you got to making decks of cards, I heard you actually say that you never had kids that had more than 10. Like
Yeah.
10 was sort of the max that a kid might have. And if you think about it, you guys, once you have like 2 to 10 cards, you kind of can't tell the difference. I mean, the stacks are pretty much, that's not there's so few, and the kids really aren't that many more to work on because they've already been tinkering all year long. Very
Yeah,
cool.
and I would suggest that maybe if you've got kids who've got 30 or 40 cards out of the whole, set, then
Hmm.
it might be that there are some things that can be done prior to doing clue cards. Maybe there's some more routines or activities that you could do to give them more facility with those facts.
Yeah, nice, nice. Cool. So, clue cards are a great thing that you guys could use to help your students after you've been tinkering a lot with relationships to help them automatize those facts. A couple other things that we wanted to mention today. So, our friend Berkeley Everett has these really cool things called math flips.
Yeah.
Math flips, and they are definitely worth checking out. So, we'll just want to shout out to those today, and we'll put a link in the show notes. Those are some of the things that you could be using to tinker around with the relationships. One more that we want to mention today is another game, actually, that we've just gotten wind of. And I've been playing it. Kim's kids have been playing it. We've had other people playing it, and we love it. I am always very hesitant to recommend, especially computer games, because so often they just go awry and they have that time element in them. And anyway, we just don't recommend them very often, but we like this one. It's called Stick and Split.
Yeah.
So Stick and Split. Highly recommend that you guys check it out. We know that right now you can get it in the App Store. It's very interesting. I'll just take a second to just explain part of what we like about it. Is it comes at learning multiplication and sort of these multiplication tables or multiplication facts, not from one number at a time. Like I'm going to learn my sevens today, or I'm going to learn my fours today, or I'm going to work on my fives today. But it comes at it from the product side, very much like the product game that we talked about in last week's episode. It gives you the product, and you mess around with all the ways to make 15 or all the ways to make 21, and you learn sort of the factor pairs and how they relate to that product. And so we really like it. Here's a moment in time that told us we had found a good game when Sue's son walked in the room, who was very what's the word I want? Snarky? I don't know. He's picky. Picky's a good word. He's picky when it comes to games. He will not play a game if it's just obviously I'm supposed to learn something from this game. He wants to play a game that's fun. And
Yeah.
so he will play Stick and Split. And one day he walked up to Sue, not after having played for very long, and he goes, "Hey, mom, I learned a new way to make 15." Oh, love that. I mean, this is a kid who's not even in multiplication yet. He's a second grader, is already playing with ways to make 15 multiplicatively. It's fabulous. So highly recommend that you check out Stick and Split. I think we're going to expect to see really cool things from this game maker in the future. So check that out. Remember, y'all, it's about taking the long view. This is a process. Your attitude makes such a big difference. Use games and routines and talk with kids and clue cards all year long. We do want kids to have practice, but without shame, without time pressure, or not just teaching facts in isolation.
We would love it if you would join us on Math Strat Chat on Wednesday evenings. You can find that on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we explore problems with the world.
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, please share with your friends and your colleagues. We want to spread the good word that math is figureoutable. Give us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast place so more people can find the podcast. Y'all, if you're interested to learn more mathematics and you want to help yourself and your students develop as mathematicians, then don't miss the Math is Figureoutable podcast, because math is figureoutable.